You're watching Arise, the world's standout news channel.
Where is this?
So may we give another round of applause as we invite inviting the President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the African Export-Import Bank, Dr. George Elombi, to make his inaugural address.
Thank you very much, MC. And now that the pictures are over, maybe I should tell you in a few minutes. The chairman was very severe. He said he wouldn't give me as much time as you did yesterday. Let me in 20 minutes tell you what it is that we plan to do in the following 5 to 10 years. But before I do so, perhaps I should confirm that I have adopted in full the protocols which the chairman, Minister Idun, had over here. Thank you very much, Chairman. Seeing is believing. We told very many participants and delegates and inquirers that you will be here to apply the oath so that I could become the president, and I was very confident of it. But they chose to believe that you were in another part of the planet, maybe with your ancestors, but it seems to have been the choice of your ancestors that you come back here. So long live our chairman, long live Africa's development, long live our trade. And we were also yesterday, Chairman, while you were traveling here, captivated by an extraordinary performance of the same Mansa Musa group, which you must have witnessed in Ghana and in Nigeria. They are dedicated to telling Africa's story in the way that Africans would want it told. We owe them our thanks for taking us down memory lane and reminding us of the greatness of the African continent and its people. Musa Keita was celebrated as the wealthiest man in human history. He embodied a timeless truth that we possess human spirit and the resources to build a prosperous continent. So, first, number one, if there is any right that we as Africans cannot and we must not never claim, that right we should not claim is the right to remain poor, for we were never poor. That's why you're gathered here today to witness and endorse what the transfer of leadership, and beyond that, what exceptional leadership can do. Orama's legacy may not be framed or defined by the historic wealth of Musa Keita, but by two things just as profound as Musa Keita's wealth and the faith that took Musa Keita traveling from Niani in Guinea to the Arabian desert. Orama's legacy is a different kind of wealth, a different form of African resilience. It is the wealth that inspires Africans to action, the spirit that ignites hope, and the bold, courageous leadership that demonstrates how our aspirations can be transformed into tangible achievements. These achievements, Mr. Chairman, also involved 3 other groups whose contribution I would like to emphasize. But let me say thank you to Professor Orama most directly. Okay, thanks very much. But we had 3 other groups of people we haven't said much of. in the last 2 days. First, the shareholders, most of you gathered in here, the owners of this great institution. You have made extraordinary sacrifices. These sacrifices are long, a little too long to enumerate. Your last major sacrifice, the one you did, putting aside for a moment your decision to appoint me as president, was the $2.4 billion capital injection you made 4 years ago. That represents more than 92% of the $2.6 billion you promised. That is a resounding success for 2 reasons. First, you made the contributions at a time of severe economic shock, when other priorities, important economic and social priorities, were calling for your attention. Second, you have completed your contributions over 1 year before the expiry date. There is no more powerful a message, there is no more powerful a way to convey your determination to see this institution survive. But we must thank you, shareholders, the African taxpayer who established this institution. Another group is your staff, the people you trained, as the Minister of Finance of Cameroon said a minute ago, those you trained in your institutions of education, those institutions that produced the like of Professor Orama and Chandir and the others. In his farewell message to the staff, Professor Orama stated that a general is only as good as his officers and soldiers. That's the case for us. You gave us the best of your nationals. And although at the bank they recognize that it's a very special privilege to serve your cause, that they are amongst a very special few, a select few, I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their extraordinary sense of sacrifice. Thank you very much, my good old friends. But just in case you think I'll leave the credit committee without those very tough questions, I'll still be there. But, distinguished invitees, the board of directors is another group. They have served your institution for some time and for a long time, and I have served that institution too. At management level, we would like to thank you for the quality of the men and women you appoint to the board. I see this not just as one of the platitudes you would hear as you go from place to place. I see this because in 30 years in the bank, and I could go a bit further, Mr. Dodo is still there if I am wrong, we were used to open contradictions, so he's free to contradict me right now as he sits. He created the institution. We have had the best set of directors that the African continent has ever given to any of its institutions. They are your eyes and your ears, the guiding spirits of what you want this institution to be. We are fortunate to have had them. Their understanding of the challenges facing the continent is just as extraordinary as the creativity in trying to tell us what path to adopt. Unless they saw the urgency in the COVID interventions, I can assure you all the determination of Professor Orama, the nights of strategy we had in management would have gone to naught. They understood it, and when the staff papers were presented to them, it took only a few days, 3 days, a few hours for a few calls for them to become convinced that their continent was in need of a very drastic intervention. They're all seated over there, the ladies and gentlemen on my right-hand side. I'd like to thank you On behalf of the staff you meet on the corridors when you come for the board meetings, I'd like to thank you for the support you give to us. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the bank has had a legacy. I'll spend a little time on that, just 2 minutes, if you'd permit, Mr. Chairman. I know you confined my time. And we've spent these days talking about the legacy. The institution you created 32 years ago has achieved much. At the board meeting on Thursday, President Orama outlined some of the achievements of the last 10 years only, of just the last 10 years. The total assets and guarantees grew more than 8-fold. Chairman, you did mention that itself a few minutes ago. And today, they stand at $43.5 billion. That's as much as any other African institution could have in the continent as loan and advances. And there's perhaps none. Total revenues also rose 7-fold, $3.2 billion in 10 years. Net income amounted to $1 billion at the end of 2024, and a 700% increase from the level of 10 years ago. Internal capital generation and very strong support of shareholders has brought in additional equity. That saw your funds rise from $1 billion in September 2015 to $7.5 billion in April of this year. That leaves you with a callable capital reaching $4.5 billion from $450 million in 2015. The bank has created subsidiaries, the Fund for Export Development in Africa, which is located in Rwanda, Afreximbank, and others. They are becoming additional sources of revenues for the bank. So contrary to the view which is going out there, we suggest that we're wasting your funds creating subsidiaries, diversifying, mission creep, left, right, and center. We actually are creating institutions that are building onto the capital base that you will need for the level of the interventions that this continent calls for. COVID interventions, investment in export processing zones, refineries, and medical centers, the AFCTA, and the Youth Creative Agenda, CANEX, our own approach on how best to reach Africa's flourishing youth, the Pan-African Trade Fair. Those are some of the achievements of the institution since creation. My first commitment to you, shareholders, my very first commitment to you, therefore, is to preserve those achievements. But with a view to the future, this moment too is an occasion to reaffirm our unwavering commitment to carrying forward this legacy, to make it deeper, create more impact, strengthen the partnerships, continue the mission of building an Africa that first trades with itself and thrives on its own terms. The mandate of the bank, as set out in the Charter, is to promote and facilitate Africa's trade. The structure of that trade is skewed. It's extremely disfavorable to Africa. It has to change. It is also too dependent on export commodities. Our mission is therefore to transform the structure of that trade. So, prime mission, transform the structure of African trade. To change that structure, we must process. We must produce. Unless we produce, we will be unable to trade amongst ourselves. But your leaders have given to us as our prime mission in the coming years the need for Africans to trade amongst themselves. Trade in itself is not their objective. Trade is to enable us to develop. Trade also helps us to build ourselves as communities. So with that in mind, Let me outline the areas we will prioritize over the next 5 to 10 years. We believe these sectors will have the most significant and sustained impact on our trade and our overall well-being. These would constitute the defining path of the next 5 to 10 years. First, we will promote and accelerate value addition and strategic minerals processing. We will work to stop the export of our raw potential. By transforming what we produce, building regional value chains, and fostering homegrown industries, we can create jobs, and we will create the jobs, retain the wealth, and drive growth across the continent. We will focus on developing strategic industries that can drive industrialization and job creation. Afreximbank will, therefore, create a new high-impact financing window, specifically for projects that process raw minerals into semi-finished goods or finished goods. We've made some promises. Some of you here seated very directly. To the governor of Ogun State, we made a promise that his fabric processing zone we will take heads on, and the partnerships are there in place. Let's be clear about this. Afreximbank is no longer interested in financing the export of Africa's raw commodities. I know we have many partners in here, and I know you would be sending text messages, calling our colleagues in the regional offices for financing. Let's be clear. If you're calling them so that we go and mine our soils, send our young men deep into the mines so that we export the gold raw and export the manganese raw, the cotton raw, the cocoa raw, in the next 5 to 10 years, we are not interested in those. We intend to establish a strategic minerals development program that to process, to finance entire value chains, from extraction and refining to manufacturing finished components. Instead of exploiting those raw lithium from the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance, we will finance factories to produce lithium-ion batteries locally. There is need to capture more value here at home and create high-skilled jobs for our people. Instead of exporting raw bauxite from Guinea, I met the Guinean minister a few minutes ago for the first time. He is attending these events for the first time too. Honorable Minister, maybe I'll have to say to you again in French after this, mais pas question de la bauxite exportée dans son état naturel. We will not take Nigerian bauxite again. Mr. Chairman, when I take off your hat of a chairman and speak to you now more directly as a minister of finance, then we could be a bit more crude and more forward-taking. No more Nigerian bauxite or Gabonese manganese or Cameroonian bauxite or South African bauxite raw. We are not interested. We will focus on domestic processing. This has numerous benefits. Mr. Gan Gupta of the Arise Group, with whom we have tried some of those, spent some time telling us that by processing the minerals, we also help to develop the infrastructure. We improve your forex earnings. He did make it clear to us that in most cases, less than 20% of the investment actually goes to the mineral extraction itself. If the investment is properly done, 80% ends up in the roads, the rail links, the port facilities, the power stations that you have to build to supply the processing zones. On this, I'm going to call on my very good friends, our alliance, the African Finance Corporation. I hope Somalia is in here. We've had these exchanges before. We'll be relying on you, and we'll be relying on our friends at the Preferential Trade Bank, TDB in Nairobi. We'll be relying on you to ensure that this processing takes place. Next, our second priority is to deepen intra-African trade and regional integration. The success of our value addition agenda of the need to process will ultimately depend on our ability to secure markets for the goods we produce. In this regard, the heads of states have mandated us to ensure that the AfCFTA works. It represents a vital platform for advancing value addition and export manufacturing. We will intensify efforts to break down trade barriers. We will work with the team led by Ambassador Wamkele to break down barriers, strengthen cross-border infrastructure, and foster seamless movements of goods, services, people, especially people, and capital across the continent. We want to emphasize people. We have many government representatives here. Fear not your people. They are not harmless. You need them across the border. It seems, in our experience in Afreximbank, that the African states fear African peoples more than they fear foreigners. We cannot get a visa, and we worked very hard in Afreximbank to get you to admit that an Afreximbank laissez-passer would be very beneficial to you. We're now happy, we are pleased that you've come to terms with those. But take the further step, open your borders. Open your borders to your own people. They do no harm. Nigeria and Cameroon, Honorable Minister, that border has been opened since colonial times. Since the British and the French came, that border has been opened. In 1960, on independence, the states resolved that they would keep the borders open. Today, Nigeria is over 250 million, sometimes they say 230, sometimes 260. Those are just figures, it's neither here nor there. But it's a massive elephant. It sits next to Cameroon with merely 30 million, sometimes 32. The Nigerians have not invaded Cameroon in their numbers. They trade freely. The free borders mean that Cameroonian students move easily into Nigerian universities to study. Fishermen come from Cameroon to do their fishing and back. So long as they know they can come and go, they really have no difficulties trading freely. Everyone is free, including thieves. They too come in, steal, and go back. They'll never stay. So let them come through so that our people can move, and only that free flow of labor is going to help us achieve some of the infrastructure and some of the processing agenda we have. Afreximbank will therefore continue to play a catalytic role in implementing the AfCFTA. You must help us in that regard. You must help us to drive that agenda. The third area we're going to focus on is trade-enabling infrastructure. We can't have that trade without the infrastructure. That's one of the areas we have been accused of mission creep. But it's very hard how a fragmented and highly dilapidated infrastructure network, from roads and railways to ports, power grids, remain a major bottleneck to intra-African trade and a significant driver of the high logistics cost on our continent. We think some emphasis should be placed on that. We already have an agenda with those countries which already produce excess power to construct the transmission lines and take to those with less. We will accelerate investments in critical trade-enabling infrastructure projects that directly connect African markets to one another. They will take the highway and rail lines, but also modernize seaports. But also, for some of you may not be aware of this, especially those in the financial services, just mere warehousing facilities and inland container depots, energy projects, and specialized logistics hubs. We are going to focus on that. For some of them, they would involve the construction of pipelines. We would focus on those. Priority would be given to infrastructure that links production centers with markets to unlock trade potential and lower the cost of doing business. Our interventions would be smart and innovative. They will be tailored to the realities of African trade, projects leveraging public and private sector partnerships, innovative financing structures, and regional coordination to ensure these investments have minimum impact. A key initiative under my leadership will be the creation of a shared, integrated infrastructure ecosystem for trade, something aimed at leveraging existing trade-enabling infrastructure in a very cost-effective manner, so that the countries which do not have can rely on the infrastructure next door. Fourth, we also think that Africa should not be left behind in the digital and innovative technologies. That's going to be an important area over the coming years. Innovation and technology are extremely potent forces for change in Africa's economic landscape, and they offer a direct way to leapfrog persistent development challenges, dismantle barriers to trade, improve efficiency, and create new opportunities for growth. Together, they create an environment where African businesses can compete globally while they strengthen regional economic integration. We must therefore embrace new technology. We must embrace them with our arms open. We must invest in digital infrastructure, in platforms for e-commerce and payment platforms that advance analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning to create a seamless digital ecosystem to unlock Africa's full economic potential. Afreximbank has already launched and commercialized some of this digital infrastructure and ecosystems. The African Trade Exchange, ATEX, African Trade Gateway, and the payment system. So this is not new in Afrexim. This is merely to enhance that which already is being done. And it is to strengthen this, I will elevate artificial intelligence as a priority to leverage its tremendous transformative potential. We have to begin to think. Perhaps we should now begin to explore the creation of a Pan-African digital currency, which includes stable coins. I throw this at you. I know some of the governors are a bit itchy about, but we're just doing that just as yet. Dear governors, we will come to you with a working paper. Fifth, we think there is now need to mobilize global African capital in the most aggressive way. Through a bold and decisive actions, we are rebuilding the once broken ties between Africa and the people of African descent around the world. These courses of action fulfill the centuries-old aspirations, the aspirations of Pan-Africanists, such as Marcus Garvey and Kwame Nkrumah, W.E. William Du Bois, George Padmore, Edward Blyden, and many others who have long advocated for the reunification of people of African descent. The presence here today, presence amongst us, of the Honorable Terence Drew, the sitting Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, who spoke to you a few minutes ago and in much acclaim from your end, is an undeniable testimony of the advances already made. He would be chairing the next chairman of the CARICOM. We are therefore pleased that African and global leaders are very inclined on our initial findings. They are inclined to create a Global Africa Commission to serve as a platform for building consensus, for building common positions to tackle our shared challenges and accelerate the integration. It will also deepen trade, investment, and economic cooperation. The Commission will be under the distinguished chairmanship of His Excellency Baba Obasanjo and Honorable P.J. Patterson, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, spirit bearers of the Africa that Marcus Garvey and Du Bois prayed for, and Kwame Nkrumah, the Africa that President Nasser and Julius Nyerere fought for. We therefore extend our sincere thanks to the leaders of CARICOM. Honorable Drew, as you go back, we've had the opportunity to be there. Tell them that the continent is integrating. I am most particularly interested in that integration. In my recent visit to Barbados, Prime Minister, our sister Maya Motley, the very fiery Maya Motley, the defender of all causes African, told me in a very confidential discussion, but which she asked me to disclose if I wish to, that there exists an Elombi in her family. Her own uncle is called Elombi. Same spelling, E-L-O-M-B-I. So a Barbadian uncle is also called Elombi. Honorable Drew, the more reason why I have to go to the Caribbean more often. There is need for me to find out where else my grandfather went to. My mother is here. I know that her grandmother was a very adventurous woman. And Tiffany, I think here Tukubato, your grandmother, was a very adventurous mother. She traveled quite widely. But I'm not sure in all the studies, in all the findings I did in the family, no mention was made of another Elombi so far off in the Bahamas. So I'll be visiting more often, Honorable Drew, because perhaps the secret is there in the Bahamas. And should the secret be there, that's the more reason why we should integrate a little more. It is no coincidence that the Commission's composition, the Global African Commission, to it we've given great prominence to Africans in the Caribbean, underscoring our belief in the movement towards one global Africa. And by global Africa, we mean not only those on the continent, but also our brothers and sisters of African heritage in Latin America, in as close as Brazil, and as far as Colombia, and in the United States and elsewhere in the globe. Global African resources. Remember, I was talking about the mobilization of global African capital. So global African resources and global African capital will therefore be made to work for global African development. Too often, African wealth, whether held by the diaspora or our own businesses and government sovereign funds, this wealth is invested elsewhere in the world. We will intensify efforts to connect this vast pool of capital from sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, diaspora investors, or private equity back to Africa's growth. Afreximbank will create innovative financial instruments, trusted co-investment platforms, and a pipeline of bankable African projects to allow African capital to flow to African opportunities. This is not just about financing. It is about ownership. It is about redefining the narrative of African development. It's time for Africa's wealth, wherever it resides, to work for our own future. The sixth pillar is the financial strength of your institution. At my appointment, our shareholders and President Urama set an ambitious goal to grow Afreximbank's balance sheet to $250 billion within 10 years. We thought that was quite a demanding task. So we went around consulting. And as we consulted further with a few African leaders, including His Excellency, the President of Egypt, who is a fundamentalist in his support to Afreximbank, and incidentally a major shareholder too, he set an even more ambitious target. He challenged us to aspire to reach $350 billion. That's extremely typical of him. This, therefore, is just not about figures and numbers. The message we took from debating the matter a little further with him, the message we took is that it was more a call for impact, for a momentous change, and that the foundation is already there. It's been laid over 30 years. And after 30 years, we ought to be creating greater impact than we have. It reflects a sense of urgency among our heads of states to build a financially strong and globally relevant African institution. It also demonstrates a deep trust, a certain confidence that they have in Afreximbank as a systemic institution for Africa's development. So they're committed to supporting it in all circumstances. And for this, we will not disappoint. With the same drive that has brought us this far, we will rise to meet the expectations of our shareholders and our continent's leadership. We recognize that only a strong and well-capitalized institution can make the scale of investments and interventions required to transform Africa's trade and the trade infrastructure and the development landscape. But what is it that gives us confidence that such growth, that level of growth is attainable within a relatively short time frame? The answer lies in our strategic focus. The focus on export processing and industrialization, the engines of wealth creation and value addition. We would rely on our own resources to do so. Honorable Drew, the paradox you described, by some coincidence, I think my colleagues and I who put this statement together also did think of a similar paradox along the same lines. You had no money, so you asked for money, you were told you were too poor to get the money. And when you had the money, you were told you were too rich to get some more. But we also did describe here that we've been investing in the wrong places. So if we invest in export processing, we get more money. And as we get more money, we'll be able to invest more. And the additional investment would produce the capital that we need to get ourselves to the level we intend to. So sometimes paradoxes. When we add value, we create wealth. And when we create wealth, we expand our capacity to reinvest. A growing base of retained earnings from reinvestment will enable us to strengthen the balance sheet of your institution. It will enable us to disburse more funds for high-impact projects, which in turn generate wealth and further drive growth. So as we put the money in the export processing zones, we will ask the states for assistance, not their money or administrative assistance. They provide the land. As we do so, you will hear more criticisms in the press about mission creep. Swipe them on one side of your hands and put them aside. These are detractors. Probably don't understand what it would take to change the situation of jobs in your countries, to give your ministries of finance a wider tax base. Unless we do that processing, nothing would change. And to do that, you must have a strong financial institutions. Next, in our agenda, we intend to create very strong partnerships, or to develop the partnerships we have. Our partnerships with relevant development institutions remain central to Afreximbank's mission. We recognize that Africa's progress depends not only on the strength of individual institutions, but also on the power of collaboration amongst us. In this regard, our partnership with the African Development Bank, which has been slow, will continue to be of enormous strategic value. We are particularly delighted, we're extremely delighted, by the appointment of the new president of the African Development Bank, a long-standing friend of Afreximbank, who has previously served as president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa and as a member of the board of Afreximbank. His very deep understanding, Mr. Sidi Ouattara, his deep understanding of Africa's development finance landscape gives us hope, gives us renewed confidence in the future of our collaboration with the African Development Bank. Mr. Sidi is also a very skillful manager of people. We believe that his combined strength, his belief in our development, and his ability to move people to achieve those is a very strong basis for that collaboration. We're also working to deepen the alliance of African multilateral financial institutions, and they draw together partners like the Trade and Development Bank, TDB, Africa Finance Corporation, Africa 50, the Reinsurance Corporation, Shelter Afrique, and the TD, many other partners in and outside the continent. We believe only by drawing on these partnerships would we be able to deliver on a very large scale and large-scale cross-border solutions. Equally, our partnership with the African Union, it's hard to call that a partnership. That's the mother institution. So it's perhaps not a partnership. It's about being in the house in which we were born, staying where we are, staying where we belong. So that partnership, in the manner in which you described it, my sister Salima Maliki, Deputy Chair, that partnership, to use your same Arab words, Governor, we would describe it in the same Samna ala Asa. We stay in the same home. That's honey. That's honey mixed with butter. When they mix, there's no way to separate. You either take it whole or you reject it whole. So we're going to stay in our home in Addis Ababa, but we'll stay there to talk trade finance, to talk development finance. We will leave the politics to you and take the cue from you. And through these partnerships, we'll continue to provide practical financial and institutional support to accelerate African trade. We also remain grateful for the strong support we've received from certain development partners. The Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, China Development Bank, China Afreximbank, the Russian Export Center. Their support and trust have been instrumental in expanding Afreximbank's capacity to deliver impactful trade-enabling projects across Africa. The Standard Chartered Bank has been a strong supporter in that initiative. As we move forward, Afreximbank will continue to build, strengthen, and expand these partnerships because we know that Africa's success will be defined not by isolated, standalone efforts, but by a shared vision, sharing the resources and sharing our commitments to our continent's development. The details of these 6 or 7 areas of emphasis that I have just outlined. Mr. Chairman, I'll be over very soon. I've finished with the vision, with the agenda for the way forward, so I'll be over in a few minutes, but the details of these will be set out, and the specific programs and interventions we'll be doing to promote these agenda items will be outlined in the 7th strategic plan that Afreximbank would release in 2026. There are a few challenges in achieving this, distinguished shareholders, and we do recognize them. Most would be due to the financial, economic, and political environment as they develop. As we confront them week on week, month on month, decade on decade. Like most financial institutions, Afreximbank has developed mechanisms to respond and adjust to these changes. In truth, your bank has developed its own special mechanisms for recurrent challenges. That is why it has gained a reputation across the continent as a counter-cyclical institution. That is why it develops the capacity to respond very quickly. And a particular type of challenge, but right now, the challenge that we face is quite unique. It is new. It is not driven, nor is it justified by economic circumstances, political, environmental, social circumstances. That challenge is not of a general nature. It is targeted at African multilateral institutions, which are owned and controlled by you. There is a worry. The attacks have become increasingly hostile. What is quite ironic is that these attacks are not because we fail or we seem to be another African failure. It is because we are successful. The more relevant we become, the more disruptive we are considered to be, we are seen to be in certain quarters. Today, we are misguidedly accused of playing in fields that are supposedly the preserve of others, a phenomenon that has mischievously been called mission drift or mission creep. Sometimes we hear it even from African quarters. Some observers argue that Afreximbank should confine itself strictly to trade finance. And so they overlook the deeper realities of Africa's economic landscape. If we confine ourselves to trade finance, how would we produce a massive refinery, the biggest of the type Alhaji Dangote has constructed? Alhaji Dangote indicated to me today morning that he will be coming, Professor Orama, he will be coming for an additional $5 billion to expand the refinery. We have agreed to look for the money wherever it is, in Afreximbank accounts, in your individual accounts, because we believe it has to be done. He says if he does so, he would double his production and cut prices by 50%. Clearly for Nigeria and for all the countries along that West African coast, this would be a significant change, but we are told in Afreximbank that for dealing with that, we are mission creeping. This is a bit strange. It is actually a fundamental misunderstanding of our mandate. Our mandate is very badly read. It is even, on the words of it, inconsistent with the very literal reading of Afreximbank's charter. How will African trade survive unless African trade can produce? And how would it produce unless we transform the very structure of that trade? So we'll continue to do the Dangotes, and we'll continue to do the other massive projects, the cotton processing zones, that will change the outlook in our continent. Next, we are said to be entitled, not to be entitled to what is described as a preferred creditor status. That status you give to us in the treaties that you have signed. Unlike other multilaterals, the large multilaterals which were created several decades ago, the Afreximbank preferred creditor status is enshrined in its treaty. It is deeply enshrined in its treaty. The treaty is unequivocal that no member state could place a moratorium on Afreximbank's loans. No member state would seek to restructure Afreximbank's loans without the approval of the board of Afrexim. Nor could any member state give a preferential treatment to any other institution without extending the same treatment to Afreximbank. So that treatment is not something that we discuss, and for us, it's not a privilege, it's an instrument to enhance the work that Afreximbank does for the continent. It's more so in that the states which created Afreximbank granted that special treatment, which historically they have only done to institutions which are entirely owned by states. The Afreximbank was created with private sector contribution and encouraged to use private sector money, 65%, finance the private sector, but do development. For that reason, the states extended to Afreximbank the same treatment that they give in practice to the older multilaterals. But the fact that the states give this same treatment for private sector lending suggests that they thought Afreximbank was extremely important. So that particular treatment to us is very critical to the work that you have asked us to do. Next, we are told that the cost of our loans is too high. And for that reason, we should not deserve your special treatment. Sometimes it isn't quite clear what the actual cost of loans are. What our critics fail to point out is the actual cost of the so-called concessionary loans they claim to provide. They provide those loans with conditionalities that cause job losses and push young men and women all over the streets of our continent. They create those loans and drive economic circumstances that create civil and political disturbances. They give those so-called concessionary loans with reforms that restrict or prevent public sector interventions in the productive sectors, such as value addition and industrialization. And those loans heighten our commodity dependence. So we're just in a circle. We need to break that circle. But it's important that it's also clear to you as shareholders and owners of the institutions. Let's be clear on that. These coordinated attacks are a testament to the success of your institution. We are dismantling established orthodoxy, delivering impact and providing alternative sources of short and medium-term trade and development financing to Africans. We thereby reduce dependence on growth-inhibiting aid and so-called grants. Why should Africa's development, Mr. Chairman, why should our development pose such a great threat to others? I'd like the ministers of finance here present to reflect on this very deeply, for they are one of the sources, one of the channels through which these attacks are made. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the minutes you've given me. That's the agenda I have for you. But let me also take this opportunity to thank you again very much for the support you gave to us, not only as Minister of Finance in Nigeria and here, and for coming here so quick. Just thank you for the work we have done in Nigeria. And let me also take this opportunity, Deputy Prime Minister, Governor of the Central Bank, to express our gratitude to the host state and to you yourself, Governor Hassan Abdallah, for the interest you take in the work of Afreximbank and for your direct involvement in it. Ambassador Selma Malika, take the message home back to Addis, our home, that there is no intention in Afreximbank, just in case there were some fears over there, there is no intention here to change what is. We would remain in our home, working together with Addis. I have a large family here, almost impossible to enumerate. My wife, my children, you saw. Mother is sitting somewhere there, maybe on the second row. I call this mother Auntie Fanny. But I have another mother called Mama Aisha. She also sits in there. And I'm sure you Africans, you can understand why we can have several mothers at the same time. One gave birth to me, another one took very good close care of me while the first went to the UK for studies. Finally, Mr. Mr. Chairman, let me say thank you to a very special individual we have in here. His name is Alhaji Yusuf. He may be somewhere in the crowd, a little tired. Maybe he isn't in here today, but he was quite visible yesterday. Alhaji Yusuf is from Ghana. He's one of those who believed in your institution from day one. Most investors in your institution were corporates. Alhaji Yusuf and a few others, Chief Odogu, maybe 3 of them, were individuals. At the time, he was developing his own investments in Ghana and trying to grow them. And when Babacar Ndiaye convinced him that the Afreximbank was a development objective, Alhaji Yusuf diverted much of his resources and invested as seed capital in Afreximbank. It was a very courageous move from an individual. So as we describe founding fathers, Alhaji Yusuf, one of those founding fathers. He gave all he had to Afreximbank, and we feel very proud. Dodu told us at the very start, in the first 10 years, you must not lose 1 cent of the shareholders. Alhaji Yusuf, we feel proud to be able to report to you that not much has been lost of your investment. It's been preserved intact. Thank all the founding shareholders of Afreximbank. Thank you very much for spending this time to listen to me, Chairman.
You're watching Arise, the world's standout news channel.